Okay, good morning all. So today we are going to look at macromolecules, although it is actually a brief because we are going to start with metabolism of macromolecules. So we need to understand the macromolecules first before going into them. So when we said macromolecules, it means the big, that is a giant molecule, very, very big molecule. And these macromolecules are four. So that is why we said the big four. We have protein, we have carbohydrates, we have nucleic acids, and we have lipids. So that is why we said the big four. So macromolecules. Macro means big molecules. So we are now going to look at one of them briefly, one after the other, so that at least before going into the metabolism, we'll have a general idea of what the macromolecules are and their roles in biological system. So now we are now going to look at why are macromolecules important to the human body. Why are they important? So macromolecules are essential to the functioning of the body. So the body cannot function if these macromolecules are absent or are deficient in the body. If they are deficient, it may lead to some disease conditions. And if they are also too much, that is also a problem. So that is the importance of the metabolism. We are going to see the metabolic pathways of each of these macromolecules, one after the other. And so we are starting with carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are the body's main source of energy. So you know that a body cannot work enough if there is no energy. So carbohydrate is one of the source of foods that provide energy in our body for normal mechanical and also other physiological roles of the body. And we have lipids. Lipid is a stored energy reserves. These allow us to survive when carbohydrates are not being supplied to the body. Yeah, of course, if there is carbohydrates, the lipid will be reserved. But when we don't have carbohydrate in our body, so we usually use lipids that are reserved, most especially in some specific tissues in our body, like adipose tissues and ovary cells, testes, and some other cells. So we need to understand that carbohydrate functions if there is no enough, lipids usually used as an energy source if the carbohydrate is exhausted in our body. So, and if you have enough carbohydrates, the body will still reserve the lipids. So that is why you will see that some people that are eating too much will realize that they are usually get fat, and this is actually as a result of too much storage of fat. And if the fat are too much in our body, so there is a likelihood you will come up with some disease conditions like, for example, obesity, hypertension, coronary heart disease, and some other disease. Actually, and with time, we'll understand how this leads to some of these disease conditions. Then we have proteins. So proteins help us stay strong by forming new bones and muscles and help us to fight disease. So we also have protein. So the main functions of proteins in our body, one, it helps us to produce new tissues, new bones, muscles, and also at the same time they help us to fight diseases. Some of the proteins that we have in our body, they are immunogenic. So they help in the immunity in fighting disease conditions. And of course, we have nucleic acids, and nucleic acids are responsible for making each person functional and unique. They are blueprint for our genetic structure. So these nucleic acids are basically two. We have DNA and RNA, and they are very, very essential in our body because they are the one that make person to stay functional and at the same time unique. You see that actually it used to be very, very hard for you to see an individuals or two individuals to look exactly the same. And the uniqueness that each and every person is because of this DNA. Sorry, it's because of this nucleic acid. So nucleic acid is what makes us unique from one another, and at the same time is the one that make us the way we are. If you are brilliant, it's because of this nucleic acid, and if you are wise enough, at the same time it's because of this DNA. So this DNA is very, very important. So nucleic acid, whenever we said nucleic acid, we are talking about two things, DNA and RNA. Then, so what are the objectives of this? So the objectives of this is to learn basic structure and functions of carbohydrates, lipids, protein, nucleic acid, and learn the role of enzymes, catalysts. So these are the main objectives of this lecture. So, but we are going to look them very brief. The reason why we are going to look at them very brief is because number one, we just want to have a classes on metabolism, but for you to have an idea of what this metabolism is, it is also very, very important to have an idea of the macromolecules. So we are going to look at them very brief. So we are starting with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the main source of energy of the body, and these carbohydrates are made of or are formed of three basic main elements. And these three basic elements, we have carbohydrates, we have hydrogen and oxygen atoms, and with the ratio of 1:2:1. So look at the glucose is an example. Look at this structure. You will see that we have glucose molecules, and in these glucose molecules, we see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon. So we have 6 carbon, and we have 12 hydrogen, and we have 6 oxygen. So that is what make it to have a formula of or a ratio of 1:2:1. So the main categories of these carbohydrates, it includes like sugar and starch. So now is the general okay. So now what we are going to look at is the monosaccharides. So carbohydrate is classified into different categories. We have monosaccharides and can form a larger carbohydrate. So from monosaccharides, we can have a larger carbohydrate. So let's look at this monosaccharide. So the smallest unit of saccharide is a monosaccharide. Mono means one. So whenever we said mono, it means one. So monosaccharides are referred to as simple sugars. We also call them simple sugars. An example of this monosaccharide, we have glucose, we have maltose, we have glucose, we have galactose, we have fructose, we have mannose. So all these are the typical examples of monosaccharides. So this monosaccharide can combine like two. If you have two monosaccharide, let's say glucose and glucose, that is two molecules of glucose, then it will give you what you call disaccharide. So when we say di means two, so disaccharides are formed as a result of the glycosidic bond between two monosaccharide. So that is what you call disaccharide. And examples of this disaccharide, we have lactose and sucrose. Then the next thing, monosaccharides. This monosaccharide can form a larger carbohydrate. So we have oligosaccharides. So when you said oligosaccharide change is constitute of 3 to 10 monosaccharides. So it means that when we said oligo, it means fewer monosaccharides. So if we have 3 to 10 monosaccharides, we have what we call oligosaccharides. And we also have polysaccharides. And when we said polysaccharide, it means many. So when you have many, that is thousands number of glucose. So that kind of carbohydrate, we call it polysaccharides. And so also we have starch, example of polysaccharides. And these starch are made up of 300 to 1000 glucose units. So you see there are many. So these are some examples of polysaccharides. And these polysaccharides are referred to as a complex carbohydrate. So we call them complex. An example of this polysaccharide are fat chrome, starch. We have like what you call glycogen. We have cellulose. All of them are typical examples of polysaccharide, and they are made up of thousands of monosaccharides. This polysaccharides is also classified into two. We have homopolysaccharides. When we said homopolysaccharide, it means those sugars that have the same repeating monosaccharides. And when we said heteropolysaccharide, are those that have different repeating monosaccharide sugars. And so carbohydrate breakdown, how do we break down this carbohydrate? Enzymes in the mouth, stomach, and small intestine break down this carbohydrate into smaller molecules. So that is why enzymes are very, very important, because if there is no enzymes in the human system, so a lot of reactions will not take place on time. And if that is happen, it means that we will all die, because our body is in constant need and demand of energy, and some smaller as well as the bigger molecules. So we need them a lot. And these enzymes are very, very essential in uh, producing those materials that are needed for our body. Then, so for specifically for carbohydrate breaking down, that is carbohydrate digestion, we have some enzymes that specifically localize in the mouth, small intestine, stomach, that helps in the breaking down of these carbohydrates. So these large complex carbohydrate molecules usually break down into smaller molecules in the human system. Not only human, in other living organisms too, this happens. And then how does the breakdown occur? So our body uses special proteins molecules called enzymes to break down large molecules into smaller pieces. So enzymes are catalysts. So when we said catalysts are chemical substances that usually speed up the rates of the chemical reaction. So these enzymes usually help in speeding the rate of the reaction without undergoing any change themselves. So when you have an enzymes and those enzymes undergoes the chemical reactions, the enzymes itself do not actually change. So it just only helps and retrieve itself without any change on its structure. Then so these are the role of enzymes. We have, you know that we have what you call activation energy. So activation energy is the energy needed to start a reaction. So an enzyme is a protein catalyzed the speed of biological reaction by lowering the activation energy. So usually enzymes, it lower the activation energy. So once the energy is lowered, then the reactant can easily convert it to the products. So that is why the main role of enzymes is actually to lower the activation energy. So some life processes are too slow when they occur on their own. So that is why the enzymes are very, very important, because and if these reactions are too slow in the body and our body is in demand of, let's say, an energy, and these enzymes is not working well, so what do you expect? It means that there must be a problem. So this is very important. And then, so each enzyme is very specific and only attached to one type of molecules. So an enzyme for glucose is an enzyme for glucose. An enzyme for amino acid, let's say threonine, is meant for that. So enzymes are very, very specific. And the molecules the enzymes act often is called, it is substrate. So we have enzyme substrate. So if we have an enzyme substrate, it will now, the enzyme will now convert that substrate to products, product enzyme substrate. Enzymes react with substrates to produce enzyme substrate complex. The enzyme substrate complex will now change and rearrange to produce what you call enzymes product complex, and the enzymes will now release the products. And enzymes activity, that is the activity of the enzymes, is rely on some physical chemical parameters, temperature and pH. So temperature and pH are very, very important in biological roles of enzymes. So we should understand. Some enzymes work at acidic pH, some enzymes work at alkaline pH, while some enzymes act at neutral pH. And some enzymes function maximally at a normal body temperature, which is 25 degrees centigrade. So it is very, very important to know that temperature, pH, and some other physical chemical parameters are very, very essential in biological roles of enzymes. So what are proteins? So proteins are nutrients which contain materials the body uses for growth and repair. So proteins is very, very important and is important in the growth, development, and repairment of the body tissue. And proteins are made of four main elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So proteins are large molecules made up of a combination of amino acids. So remember, for the carbohydrate, it's a combination of simple sugars. But in the case of proteins, it's a combination of a large number of amino acids for you to have protein. Then, so look at how it is. Amino acid will produce peptide, peptide will produce polypeptide, and polypeptide will produce protein. So that is it. So this is actually a typical example. Look at how this thing work. Look at, this is an amino acid. So amino acids are building blocks of proteins. And so you now look at them. Lysine is an example of an amino acid. This is a typical lysine. So amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. So these building blocks bond together to form a chain, and these chains are called peptide. So proteins are formed of combinations of large peptide chains, and these peptide chains are referred to as polysaccharides. So amino acid will produce peptide, peptide will produce polypeptides, and these polypeptides will further combine to produce what you call proteins. So in order for the body to use proteins, enzymes in the stomach and small intestine break down polysaccharide down into individual amino acids. So we have some enzymes that when we take carbohydrate, and these enzymes will now digest these proteins to produce an amino acid molecules individually, because there are stages that our body is just in need of some amino acids. So the proteins that we take must be break down to produce those individual amino acids so that our body will utilize them. And then the next thing is lipids. So lipids lipid functions as a stored energy. So and they are also insulation for the body. They have to insulate for the insulation of the body. So that is why sometimes you see that fat people during cold weather, you see that they get cooled very actually less compared to those that are slim. So it also assists in the absorptions of certain vitamins, and lipids are large molecules that can be categorized as fat or oil. So lipids are composed of they are composed of triglycerides. So I said this is actually a simple explanation of these macromolecules, because we have a lot of things. Even the lipid itself is divided into simple lipid and the complex lipid. So examples of this simple lipid, we have like triglyceride, we have waxes and other things like that. So specifically here, lipids are composed of triglycerides, and these molecules also are made up of carbohydrates, hydrogens, and oxygen atoms. So this is a typical example of triglycerol. So how do we get this triglycerol? Is we have one glycerol and three fatty acids. So these three fatty acids and one glycerol will now react through what you call esterification reactions to produce triglyceride. And this triglyceride, the chain of triglycerides also now produce what you call the lipid itself. So lipid breakdown, so bile and enzymes in the small intestine break down into small molecules of fatty acid and glycerol. So the next thing is nucleic acid. The nucleic acid stores and carries genetics information and it's composed of nucleotides. So what I want us to understand is the nucleic acid is very essential in the body. As I said, it stored the genetics information, and it also carries those genetic information from parents to their offspring. And these nucleic acids are located in different parts of the cell. So we have nucleic acid in our nucleus, and we have them in what you call mitochondria. We have mitochondrial nucleic acid, and we also have nucleic acid in the chloroplast in plants. So, and the building blocks of this nucleic acids are nucleotides. An example of this nucleotide, we have uracil, we have we have uracil, we have guanine, we have thymine, and we have adenine. So these are the nucleotides. So unlike other macromolecules, nucleic acid are not often from food. So we didn't get them from food. But all other macromolecules, we get them from food, of course. Then, so these nucleotides, all nucleic acid are made from combinations of nucleotides, as we said. And there are 5 nucleotides. These 5 nucleotides, we have uracil, cytosine, thymine, adenine, and guanine. And this is some so nucleotides are made of 3 parts. So there are 3 components of nucleic acid. We have a 5-carbon sugar, we have a base that has nitrogen atoms, and we have an ion of phosphoric acid known as phosphate. So these are the components of the nucleotides. These are the components that produce the nucleotides. So ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm going to stop here. Then the next thing that we are going to look at is metabolism. Thank you.